Hey everyone, Yang Yanjiao back again. Today we have the master of the OD&D adventure campaign, the basic expert. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me on. Looking forward to chatting about OD&D, old school games, and Macuahuitl as well. So, thank you.
Yeah, so how did you get started gaming?
Um, well, I wasn't. I've told this story a couple times before. I wasn't really allowed to play D&D as a kid. I grew up in a very evangelical, strict Christian household. So that was seen as evil. It was late '90s, early '90s, but it was still, at least the church my family attended, it was still the tail end of Satanic Panic. So I wasn't allowed to play these sorts of things. So I didn't get my start in the hobby till about mid 2000s, 2010, maybe 9, 10, 11. I don't remember. It was somewhere around then. And it was with fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Ooh, that's a
Yeah,
tough one.
I didn't know any better though. It was one of those things where you go into the store and you're like, I mean, my girlfriend, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, bought me the starter set for it. It's one of those things where
Oh, that's cool.
I want to play D&D. I never got to play as a kid. And then, so, your girlfriend goes into the store and for Christmas and orders D&D, and fourth edition was the edition at the time. That was what's on the shelf. So that's what you get. I didn't know any of the controversies of fourth edition or anything like that at the time. I had fun with it.
Hmm.
Looking back on it, I see the shortcomings, obviously, of the system. But at the time, I didn't know any better. And I ran dungeon crawls even then, because that's what I perceived the game was supposed to be, was you're crawling through subterranean tombs and catacombs and dungeons and finding treasure. So I ran my games like that. And I enjoyed that for a while, but yeah, that was probably the start. And I guess as a kid too, I've always enjoyed making games. Like, even if they were just
Hmm.
like simple, silly board games or card games or something like that, I was always, even back into elementary school, trying to do that kind of stuff. So this kind of stuff has always interested me, and I just didn't get a chance to really dive in headfirst until I was an adult. So
And so what was it, as an adult that made you say like, yeah, this is what I want to do?
well, I've always liked fantasy literature. I read Tolkien, loved Lord of the Rings. I was one of those kids, like, I was reading Tolkien in math class. I'd have like my math book up, and then the Lord of the Rings would be inside my math book. And so I'm not paying attention to math. I'm reading Tolkien. So I was one of those kids. I loved fantasy. I read the Dragonlance novels. Yeah, I read. I really liked at the time. I was reading a lot of like the Five Rings novels and stuff like that.
Oh.
The Legend of the Five Rings novels. I enjoyed those. So like fantasy was always, as far as fiction is concerned, was always interesting to me. That and pulp novels, pulp stories too, Conan, all that kind of stuff. And so I already had sort of like a taste for that adventure genre, I guess, as far as literature was concerned. And you'd always heard about D&D. It's like, oh, it's like those stories, but you get to be a character in it. You get to make a kind of this emergent story with it, and that just always appealed to me. So I don't know. I just think it was my love of fantasy literature and stuff like that, and finally being able to be an adult that could try it on my own. So I'd always heard about it. It always intrigued
Hmm.
me. It was like this mysterious thing. D&D was like this mysterious thing. How do you play this? What is this thing? And so then you finally play it, and for me, I was hooked. So right off the bat.
Yeah, it was kind of like that forbidden fruit. I think I'm a little bit older than you. So in the 80s, it was like very much like what you were talking about, where moms were like, oh my God, I heard it was Tool of Satan.
Yeah.
Um, which, I guess, Ouija boards weren't banned, but sure, Dungeons and Dragons, why not?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there was that whole period, 80s through at least the mid 90s, where, if you were into D&D, you sort of like had to secretly draw a D20 on the ground. And if someone recognized it, you're in. If not, you just quickly wiped it away.
Yeah. And
Mhm.
it was funny though, because when I got into it, I got into the hobby with no one else that I knew being into the hobby. So like I read the DMG, I learned the rules, and then I just brought it to my friends and I was like, you guys want to play D&D? I read the rule books. Let's play. And so then I, sort of infected the rest of my group of friends. My brothers, they started playing. So it's sort of just, and a lot of these people, like one of my brothers, he's still in some of my consistent gaming groups. Even though he lives on the other side of the country, we still try and run games with each other as often as we can. So, it's just kind of funny that way.
So you said you started with 4E,
Mm-hmm.
and with you're gonna have to forgive my pronunciation for most of this episode, but with
Macuahuitl, yeah.
Macuahuitl, it's for the Whitebox or the original Dungeons and Dragons set. So what is it about the original versus the later versions that you think really marries it perfectly with your campaign?
OD&D 0E is like very sword and sorcery. I feel like more so than modern editions of D&D. Modern editions of D&D are a little more heroic, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
You're a little more your character at level 1 is a little more sturdy, like especially in 4E. I remember the hit point blow at just level 1 was just insane. And so with older editions, whether it's AD&D BX or 0E, the Whitebox rules, it's a little more grounded, war gamey. You really need hirelings. You really need to. It leans heavily into resource management, and it is definitely much more gritty, bloody, dangerous. The dungeon offers real fear, real sense of dread. Going, there's that risk versus reward of like, do I go deeper in the dungeon because there's maybe more gold and jewels and magic items there, or should we head back with our lives? Maybe should we be greedy or not? And that's just a vibe that's just not present in a lot of modern editions. I mean, you can play games, you can play 5th edition that way if you want. It's totally plausible, but the rules don't lend themselves as good to that as, in my opinion, as a lot of older editions. And with this game, with Macuahuitl, it's very much in the same route. You're not really delving for gold and treasure in this. You're waging war against other city-states and factions in the Valley of Mexico. But it's that same idea I wanted to have of just like deadly and simplicity of rules, ease of rules, where the rules sort of, I feel like with older editions, they really sort of fade to the background a lot better than a lot of modern editions, where they sort of fade to the back. You're rolling, the rules are simple, and you're able to really get immersed in the game world, in the adventure that's unfolding, in the war game that could happen, because the rules sort of just draw to the back, and they're simple, light, sleek. In my opinion, their biggest problem with older editions for a lot of people, I feel like, isn't necessarily the rules themselves. It's more that old school layout, because no one had really done this before. So, you look at this thing and you're like, I don't understand this, and it's not laid out like a modern book, so it is confusing to modern audiences, because when they made that, no one had ever done this before. How do you make a rule book for a game that this is the first of its kind? So I'm a little more forgiving of that, but I think that's what drew me to it. It's like this gritty, really leaning into the adventure gaming, and like magic is still powerful, but it's rare. I like all those aspects of how the rules of older editions sort of shape the world, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm working on my own campaign for 5e, and most of the people I've talked to would have said that 5e is the one that lends itself more towards immersing yourself in the world, because it's so much harder for the characters to die, especially once you get past like level 2. But now that you mention it, the way the rules are crafted and they sort of get out of the way, that really makes a lot of sense to me, that they really kind of had that going in the original versions of, well, at least the first and second versions of D&D.
Yeah, in Whitebox, like you're rolling D6s and a D20, and that's like all you got. you don't have D8s, you don't have D4s, no percentile dice really. You know, they had special D20s that were like the percentile dice. No D12s, none of that stuff is in there. It's just D6s and a D20. And then if you're going to go real old school, you know, you could try and implement chainmail into your campaign and use that as your resolution combat method, as opposed to, you know, the D20 is the alternative one in the white box in the three little tan books. That's the alternative method. It became the main one as time went on, especially once supplement 1 came on with Greyhawk and everything. But you know, it's just so simple. I like that simple elegance. I like that leaning into that war game element and trusting the referee with a lot of judgment calls as well. You know, there's no feats to worry about. There's no like these paragraph, like 1-page long spells that have all these, if this happens, but then if this happens, but also keep in mind if this happens. It's just like you look at the spells of Whitebox and they're so vague, and I love it because it means spells can be used in creative ways, and that too just draws me to it as well.
Yeah, you know, it's something I was talking about with someone who does a lot of like prose authoring. They write novels and stuff, and talking about like what's the difference between you know, like writing for prose and writing for like RPGs. And my answer was, well, you know, if you're writing a book, it's basically from God's lips to the audience's ears, where there's nothing in between. And if something gets messed up, you know, either you screwed up or they weren't able to interpret it correctly. But with role-playing games, you know, you have that middle ground where you need things to be specific enough to make the world feel alive, but it can't be too much because the DM needs to put their own spin on things, and you need to leave enough wiggle room for the players to be creative and have fun with everything, or else you're just like playing a video game RPG.
Yeah, and we've seen with, you know, with going back to 4th edition, what happens when you lean a little too far into that video game aspect. Like, I know some people like it and still play 4E to this day, but looking back on it, I'm like, this is just an MMO with more steps, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't necessarily want that at the table. I want to do the beauty of TTRPGs, the beauty of these games is that you can do things at them that you can't do in really any other media, in any other medium. You know, they're wholly unique to this kind of game, this sort of group activity. And I don't know, I feel like it's more beneficial to lean into that than lean into video games or whatever, you know, in that regard, which I feel like a lot of modern games do, which I totally understand because, you know, back in the 70s when the white box came out, when O0E came out, like it was just war games and other things like that people had previous experience with. And so that's the audience they're speaking to. And now, you know, wargaming is a very niche hobby, and video games, like everyone's played a video game. So like we can speak the language of that kind of gamer more clearly to get them to understand the game. But I do think that affects obviously design choice as well with a lot of modern editions as well.
So yeah, how did you go about that when you were making your Aztec campaign guide? Because to me, when I saw it, like, oh yeah, this really does lend itself pretty well to how bloody those old games could get. But you have I don't know, there almost seems to be like a bifurcated split in the TTRPG community where like one is, you know, pretty much all random generated and just bloody, come with 10 characters, and the other is, no, I really want to see my character go through an arc, and I'm very attached and I'd be upset if my guy died. So how do you, when you're designing, how do you sort of balance those two things, or don't you?
I generally just lean more towards the old school, like death is a real possibility for your character. You know, I take a much more simulationist approach, I guess, to use a phrase from Alexander Macrease, that I'm trying to simulate a world. And I view the game world like history, you know. I've been bored lately, so I've been watching a lot of videos and reading stuff on the Reconquista.
Mhm.
of Spain, and really interesting stuff, like total Game of Thrones stuff. And it's super interesting, it's super fascinating. And you have like this one king of Castile. He's besieging a city, and he outnumbers the Arab soldiers in the town. Like, he's gonna smash these people. And that night, the Black Death sweeps through his camp. He dies, and a bunch of his soldiers die. They got to go home, and the emirate to the south in Granada is saved from the Black Death. And it's like that. To me, like, I can see how some people would be the king character or one of these characters in that sort of scenario and be like, that's really disappointing. But to me, that's real. That's like, obviously it's history. That's what happened. And I like that sort of thing, and I generally play with people that like that sort of thing, and I make games for the kinds of people that like that sort of thing. And that's not to say that I want to have a character that's going to make it to level 10 or beyond and retire, or become the NPC and then I make a new character. Not to say that that's bad or wrong, but I've just sort of moved away from that mode of play, and I've really found that I really just love that sense of danger, that it's really there. It's tangible. Your character might die, um, and I feel like that fits the setting. Like, the Aztecs were a warrior culture. Everything revolved around war. Um, war and prowess in battle and valor in battle was one of the only ways you could advance your station in Aztec society, from a peasant to close to nobility, was to just be good at war. And so, with that comes the possibility of death. And so for me personally, with a setting I'm trying to connect and make, I feel like rules influence setting as well. Um, that it was important to lean in towards that other side where your character might die. That might be a real possibility. Um, and you have to be okay with that. Obviously, someone could buy Macuahuitl and they could run it in a more modern way, I guess, or in a way opposite of way I intended it to be, which is fine. Once the book's in your hands, I can't do much about it, about how you run it. More power to you. But the game is definitely focused, and my preferences are definitely focused towards, there's a real possibility of character death.
Yeah, to me, that's I like some of the mechanics of more modern versions of D&D, although I like the original too. But I think that one of the things that it really loses is more that sword and sorcery aspect, where your character's life really is on the line in virtually everything that they do.
Mm-hmm. I mean, when you're reading a Conan novel, like, if you didn't know that, because the Conan novels are published all out of order, all the Conan stories. So, like,
Mhm.
one of the first novels that you see published is he's already king. So then when you hear a story like about him when he's younger, you kind of already read the story of when he's king. So you're like, I know he's going to be okay. But if you hadn't read that, if you only read like Tower of the Elephant, and that was your first introduction to Conan, and you see the thief that's with him get bit by a spider, fails his death save, and he's dead. And now Conan is facing this sorcerer. There's that real distinct possibility as you're watching it, like, is Conan going to make it? I feel like Clark Ashton Smith has a lot of stories like that too, where sometimes like the main characters just die in his stories from stupid things. I feel like sometimes they read like D&D play reports sometimes of horrible things happening to characters. And yeah, I just like that. To me, that's fun. And I feel like I think players, maybe they don't. I think more players would like it than they realize, because when you overcome something where death for your character was a real possibility, it feels really earned. It feels really
Yeah.
special. You overcame real adversity as your character, as opposed to wondering, well, did the GM give it to me? Was it just like, did he put like did he lay like Nerf foam everywhere for me? Um, and if you want to play that way, again, I that's fine. It's just, for me
Yeah.
personally, it's not for me. So.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, once you buy a set or a campaign guide or whatever, go play it how you and your friends want to play. That's the most important thing. But I do agree. Like I said, I'm working on the campaign guide. I've got two alpha groups going to test the game,
Hmm.
and one of them they just had 3 out of 6 characters die in one battle, and they really seem a lot more focused and like, oh man, our choices are really important about what we do here, what we
Mm.
do there. Um, there's a lot less. I don't know if screwing around is the right word, but like doing things that like if you were in a gun battle, you wouldn't just walk it right out into the middle of the field. You'd try to run to different
Cover, yeah.
different cover and stuff. Well, now in the game, they're trying to do that. So, one thing that really got me excited about this campaign is that for some reason, you don't see a whole lot of historical campaign sets. I don't know if it's like nobody wants to be the guys who made the Oriental Adventures or what exactly it is, but there was that really nice Filipino one a couple years ago for
Mm.
5e that I suddenly blanking on the names, but I was kind of wondering like, oh, why don't we see more South American / Central American or African kingdom stories? So what is it about the Aztec that really made you say, I really need to write a campaign guide?
Um, I mean, it's part of my heritage, so I've always been interested in that since I was a kid. And when you learn about this kind of stuff, you're like, oh, like some of my ancestors were these people. That's really cool. It's no different than if you were, you know, we know some of my ancestors fought in the in a Frankish battle or something like that. Like, it's interesting to you. So sometimes if it is interesting, it really grabs you and you start researching stuff. So as a kid, I was always interested in this kind of stuff. But yeah, I also saw a hole there where I was like, there's not much out there that covers this area. And I think it's for a couple different reasons. I think one, the Western European fantasy is just so ubiquitous with a hobby. It's
Mm.
so popular. Everyone wants to do their own variant or spin on that. And I love the Western fantasy. I think it's great. When I run D&D, it's generally what it is. Um, I also think partly too, it's the subject matter of this sort of game, of this sort of setting in Macuahuitl. It's very dark, right? It's very dark and
Mhm.
alien to our Western sensibilities. And I say right off the bat in the book, um, your things that your player characters are going to be doing in this game are going to be things that would be viewed as bad guy things in your traditional D&D game. And you have to be okay with that. It wasn't, but this was viewed as heroic to the Aztec people, going and conquering a city state, getting slaves and sacrifice victims. Like, this was just part of life, and it was a heroic thing to do in their eyes. And so you have to kind of play to that, but that also means it's not going to be for everyone, obviously. And I totally understand
Mhm.
that some people would be like, well, I feel like I'm playing, I'm doing things that I don't feel comfortable doing. I totally get it, um, but I think that's another part of it. And then I think another part is the fear. If I didn't have that ancestry, I know that, and I got questions about it, I know that it would be a lot harder. It'd be harder, for instance, for you to make this. You'd have a lot more
Yeah.
hurdles than I do. I got a free pass because I have that ethnicity, but others that don't, they don't have that. So I think there's some fear with that. And so I kind of felt like if anyone can get away with this too and be true to the historical source material, like someone like me could. So I should also do it for that reason as well, so that this thing can exist and someone made it, and it's out there.
So, mentioning staying true to the historical material, for you, when you're making this, how um, important is that? I mean, like you're saying, it is a different worldview from what we're used to in just our normal lives and in fantasy tabletop playing. So, like, in some ways, you have to, like, it can't be completely alien or people won't be able to relate to it. How important to you was it to stay on that side of historical accuracy, if that would be the right term?
Yeah, I mean, granted, it's like historically accurate as best as I could do myself, but like
Mhm.
obviously there's that fantasy layer over it too. You know, there's magic, there's mythical beasts from Aztec lore in there, but everything is within that Aztec flavor. But I felt like it was important for this game because it just would seem to me disrespectful to superimpose my modern sensibilities over a culture that isn't around anymore to defend itself. That isn't, and it wouldn't be true. Like if I all of a sudden said, if I like glossed over human sacrifice, for instance, like that would be like omitting jaguar warriors or eagle
Mhm.
warriors. It would be like omitting an important part of their culture and who they were, their religious aspects that shaped their worldviews. These are all like important things, and so it just didn't. It just felt wrong to me. I didn't feel right doing that, and so because at first I was trying to find ways of softening things. I'll admit at first because I knew this would be a problem for some people, and as I was trying to soften it, I was just like, this isn't working. I just need to lean into who they were as a people and just stay true to that. And once I did that, all the pieces just fell together and it felt correct. It felt right. Um, so I don't know. It was really important because I just felt like, well, first of all, like these are my ancestors, so I kind of want to be. Yes, I disagree with how they handled their religious rituals and stuff like that, obviously, but like I want to be respectful of it and present these people as they were as best as I can, to have that authenticity there. If I didn't do that, then I can't really. I feel like it loses something. It diminishes the work in some respect, and I didn't want to do that to it.
So you know it's a whole different culture, and there's so many things. How did you sort of whittle it down into the components that made it into the campaign guide?
So there's character classes in it, and the character classes are obviously a big part of that. So as you're looking at character classes, I try and throw in different things that about like who they who they were, who these classes were, what these warrior classes were within Aztec society. Um, the game is obviously really focused on adventuring as like an Aztec warrior, so it was important uh, to really hone in on that sort of stuff. Essentially, like when you're world building, you know, you're trying to focus on um, you're trying to focus on a lot of the player facing things, and so that's what I tried to think about. What are player facing things that will be important? So character classes, spells, um, some of the economics, some of the cultural stuff, like how their class based society was. Uh, uh, Law, what was law like, what was military service like, what are things that like players might ask or that a GM would need or referee would need in order to competently run this very alien setting. uh that's what I tried to really hone in on. I tried to put myself in, because I had been researching this for 2 years. Like if I didn't know anything,
Mhm.
what would I need to know? What did I need to know going into this? What was I purposely seeking out to make this setting work? Those need to be the key things I need to focus on.
And what part of it did you find the most interesting just for yourself?
Hmm. Probably like learning about the calendar and stuff like that, just how important time was. Mostly because it was a real revelation to me. I'm a big proponent that keeping track of time in your games is very
Mhm.
important. So it was like, oh, well, I think time is very important, and timekeeping is very important in your games. So the Aztecs were all about time. They had their sacred calendar, they had their more mundane 365-day calendar, and with these things, like I could gamify this stuff. So that was super fun to do, was to make the zodiac sign at character creation and learning about what they viewed, how they viewed their religious aspects and the gods and stuff like that, how they felt like you were the zodiac sign you were named under, how important that was, and it would set you up for the rest of your life. So um, yeah, I thought that
Yeah,
was pretty cool.
I was reading through the PDF a little earlier, and I was kind of surprised. You know, in we're so used to, like a Virgo or a Capricorn. And there's really nothing negative under those
Mhm.
things. But some of these signs are actually like, I don't know, if you were born April 1st to May 12, you're just screwed because that's an unlucky sign.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck for the rest of your life. And the number of the day you're on was important too. They had sacred
Mhm.
numbers and all that stuff. So I really wanted to gamify that. I feel like I tried to balance it to where your character is not totally gimped, but I wanted to have that random aspect there because I feel like random character generation is a big part of old school games.
Yeah,
Three
yeah.
3D6 down the line, that was like the precursor of that. Well, actually, 0E kind of specifies that the DM rolls for you and then tells you what your attributes are. Like they roll behind the screen and then say like, oh, okay, your strength is this, your intelligence is this. Pick a class. So I really wanted to lean into like that random generation because I feel like that's important. So no standard arrays, no point buy, anything like that. It's pure like the dice are the gods and fate, and they're going to determine what your character is. I wanted to lean into that.
Yeah, that's something that I often find frustration with in modern fantasy role playing games. Like, if you look at a lot of the old world magics, a lot of it was about divination and about like really understanding the stars and being able to predict the future and things like that. And that's nowhere to be found in any of, like the modern D&D spells or anything.
Yeah.
It's like, why?
Yeah, they're all like combat based spells or something, which I get because
Yeah.
players are going to find themselves in combat more often than not. So combat magic is really important. But yeah, I don't know. We can get to the spells if you want to, but like I tried
Sure.
to put in some spells that were sort of, there were some divination spells and stuff like that in there. Some of them are combat spells, but a lot of them are still combat spells because this is like a war game type thing. But as is the case with most things, like if you want to build your own spells for this, and more power to you as well.
Yeah, that's to me as well. Like, as cool as I think D&D is in general, I'm kind of bored with the default D&D world. Like, it's any of these things that tend to over explain the world, I think end up getting real flat
Mm.
because you kind of know everything. The mystery's gone. One of the things that I like about taking it to a new setting or something like this is, even if you're in that Aztec world, there's still a bunch of mystery to it. Not everything is explained away, other than like, oh well, the gods made this happen or that, but it's not like, well, 10,002 years ago, this god did this and that, and therefore,
Yeah.
you need that mystery. You need the unexplained in the world in order to keep people's interest, I think.
Yeah, and then players and refs can kind of fill in those gaps themselves, and sometimes just quietly by themselves. The
Hmm.
people kind of make during the game, they might start making their own head canon as to what's going on. So, and that's fun.
Yeah, I mean that's how I like to run games. You get the players to do all that stuff for you. They'll
Yeah,
say like, "Oh, it must be like this and that," and yeah, that's exactly how it is.
taking
You
notes.
you figured it out.
Yeah, but so I try to make the spells unique. There's some that are
Hmm.
just they're reskins of classic spells, like healing touch,
Hmm.
like the healing spells and stuff like that. They're or light spells that are sort of, I feel like, necessary for this kind of game. I reskin them. They're pretty generic enough to where you can reskin them to fit that Aztec setting. But I tried to make
Hmm.
everything else, 90% of the rest of the spells or so, unique to the setting. Um, as far as like description, components, their flavor, and their effects. Also, how you acquire the spells is different, slightly different than traditional D&D. Traditional D&D, you're, I'm the magic user. I'm going to spend 2 hours just memorizing from my spell book, or I'm a cleric. I'm going to spend 2 hours praying to the gods for the spell. Oh, look, I got it. Cool. Whereas in this, like it's kind of like a cleric where you have access. So at level 1, as a Nohali character, spellcaster, you have access to all level 1 spells, but you have to petition the gods for these. And there's a reaction roll mechanic that I implemented, which could mean that like it could take lots of time to get the spell you want. So if you're on a time crunch, it could be a problem. Of course, you can offer sacrifices of both minor things, but people as well if you want, in order to give yourself a boon with your reactional to the gods, therefore hopefully guaranteeing that you get the spell and that you get their favor. But I thought that that would add that extra flavor of that Vancian spell slot system. I think it works, it's fine, but I wanted to add that Aztec flavor to it, add that Mesoamerican feel to it, where it feels unique to this setting. Because to them, like in traditional D&D, the magic user is separate from the cleric. They get their spells from two different sources. One's divine and one's just natural magic. Whereas the Aztecs, like sorcery was, looked like in some cases you could say a magic user, but it was linked to the gods still. Like everything, all these magical sources still had the same source. It wasn't these two separate paths you could take. So that was my solution to trying to solve that problem and making it feel appropriate to the setting.
Yeah, I like that. That's another one of my bugaboos about the way D&D has sort of become is, there's not a lot of real separation between arcane and divine magics. There technically is, but it's never played that way. And then like, well, what's druid magic? Is that from gods or from nature? Is there a third force? Or so to me, like sort of how you be consistent with the magics and how they're used is kind of important because it really signals to the players, like it gives them more of a direction for their characters.
Yeah, role play elements and all that kind of stuff, and it just adds to that world flavor. I feel like
Definitely.
to make it feel more not sensical, but everything that certain things like that fit. Like magic is a big component of any game you're going to play that's fantasy like this, and so the magic has to feel like it fits, in my opinion. So.
And so, with regards to the campaign, the first thing I think we should mention is that you are already funded. So, anyone who backs this campaign will be getting the campaign guide.
Yeah, they will be getting the book. I mean, as you saw, the PDF is done. So, my hope is once this is done in 12 days, I'm going to add all the backers' names into the book, and the PDF will go out immediately to everyone that backed the project. So you're not going to have to wait too long for the PDF. I'm going to wait a little bit of time because I'm sure I have mistakes in here still. I've gone over this PDF multiple times, and I've had other people look at it and edit it. But I'm sure there's mistakes in there. So having 433 pairs of eyes on that will help me find any typos or issues like that. So maybe after a couple weeks, then I'll start getting it set up for print on demand. So the print on demand people should get their books pretty soon. And at that same time, I'll send it off to the printer for the hardcover offset print and get those printed and out through fulfillment as soon as I can. So I feel like that was an important thing to really stress to people with this, was that like, I'm not asking for money I viewed this as pre-orders pretty much. I wasn't asking for money to like write the book or pay for artists. Like everything's done. I already finished everything. I just wanted to make a nice offset print for this for people. And so that's what the whole point of this was.
All right. So let's take a little bit of a look here at your different levels. So what seems to me to be perfectly reasonable, $10 for a PDF copy.
For at this point, I think it's like 176 or so pages. $10 PDF. Everything you need to run it. Like you don't need any other book to run this too. Like it's a full Whitebox rule set hacked to be Aztec with the setting. It's a setting book and a game book, rule book, all in the same book. So
it's got all that combat information and character creation and everything else. It's all in there.
Monsters, setting information, treasure tables, magic items, random encounter tables, rules for exploration, all that stuff is in here. I'm always about like, I understand money's tight now all the time with the way the economy is, and we still want to have fun. We still want a game. So, I've always been about trying to make affordable stuff for people to have fun with. I think that's important.
Definitely. So then the PDF plus the print on demand for only $2 more.
Well, you still have to pay for the at cost printing, which will probably be
Oh,
like
okay.
$3 to $6 at the most to print the soft cover at it. So it'll end up being probably like $15 to $18 at the most, probably for that, plus shipping. But that'll be through DriveThruRPG. But that's just the for that, you get the PDF for with that tier as well. So.
All right. Hardcover offset print in the PDF.
Yeah, that's the straight. So 32 plus shipping wherever you are, $32. You get the PDF, the hardcover, and it's yours to game with. So
Yeah, and so also this note for backers for people outside the U.S.
Mhm.
So I know that right now it's kind of tough because shipping is absolutely insane, especially going like to Europe and Australia. So it's interesting that it seems that people from other countries who still want the book, if they contact you, you'll make arrangements to get it to them.
I tried to when I launched it, I tried to offer as many places as I could. I'm using a fulfillment company, Flying Cloud Fulfillment, really great company. If you're doing a Kickstarter, I highly recommend people check them out. But what I think what allowed my Kickstarter to be so successful is that is that I'm not shipping the books out myself. I'm sending it to a fulfillment company, and they're going to use their much better shipping rates that they can get than I could get in order to get these books out to people all over the world. So they gave me a spreadsheet with the quote that they gave me, and they're like, "You're going to be on this line because it's going to be the book is going to weigh about this much. So all these countries we can ship to, here's the shipping rates for them." And I was like, cool, this is easy, this is great. And opening this, because if I hadn't used them, if I was going to ship this myself from my house here, like I probably wouldn't be able to offer it outside of the States. It'd be too much work, too expensive. But because this company has access to shipping rates I don't have access to as a bigger company, I think that's what allowed it to succeed, is because I can get it to people outside of the States, which is super helpful.
Definitely. All right. So the next one is all 3 books, I believe.
Yeah, so you get the print on demand version. Still have to pay the at cost printing and shipping for that, plus the hardcover, plus the PDF. My thinking behind this, I wasn't going to do this one at first, but then I thought about it, and I'm like, I have really nice books, and sometimes there's snacks at the table, and there's that one guy who brings Cheetos or Doritos, and you're like, here, you can use the print on demand version and get your greasy Dorito fingers all over that one, and you can't touch the hardcover one. Sorry, but it's the same book. You can use this one, and so you can let your grimy players get their greasy fingers all over the print on demand one, which is meant to be played and abused a bit more than the hardcover, and keep your nice hardcover looking nice and pristine. So
Definitely. Yeah, that's always something I wondered why they didn't do, is have like a supplemental book where, in your main book for the DM, you're going to have like maps with all the locations of things and whatever. But then why not have like a separate book? Because you want to show your players how cool the game you bought was, but you don't want to see all the secret stuff. Like, why not?
Yeah, I mean, this will have everything. The print on demand will have everything in it. So you got to tell them, like, don't go to the monster section and start reading up stat blocks.
Yeah.
You're ruin the game for yourself if you start doing that. But my thinking is, because this is going to be a very limited print run for the hardcover. I'm only getting, for the moment, 500 printed. If more people back it above 500, obviously I'll print more. But only 500, and like I don't know how I'm going to print it again. So I mean, I would love for something I made to become kind of a collector's item and special. And so I understand people not wanting to damage something that's nice, as well. But then having the print on demand version available, where again, that can get tossed around, abused, you can spill your Mountain Dew on it, and it's not as big of a deal as like you spilled it on the hardcover book, dude. Like, what the heck? You can't play with this anymore. Like that.
No, Mountain Dew on any of my books would be a beating. That means I'm just gonna wipe every character you ever make. But is this something you see yourself continuing into the future, like writing more, either like one shot, single modules, as opposed to a campaign guide, or would one day you like to sell a set of minis or something like that? Or it's like, oh, I'm good, I got that out of my system.
I do want to support Macuahuitl a bit more after. I want to offer some extra stuff. So I tried to. The game is as complete as it can be. Like, you can take this single book and run an Aztec themed campaign for as long as you want with it. But I want to add more stuff that can be supplemental, actually supplemental, not doing the EA like giving you an incomplete game. Now buy the DLC to get the full game. But I want to do some like I want to call them like codices, kind of like what the Spanish called them, and I want to do ones like on kind of more of the enemies of the Aztec. I go over them briefly in this book. You get like a few paragraphs about like the Tlaxcala Confederacy and the Zapotec people, but I think it'd be cool to offer expansion books for those that kind of go more in depth into those. So maybe you want to run a game from the perspective of the Tlaxcala fighting the Aztecs. They were bitter rivals with each other, always at war with each other. Maybe you want to play as like the Tlaxcala instead of the Aztecs. That would be super interesting and cool to me, but it only adds to the game. It's not like you are required to have that to run the core game. So I want to do stuff like that. People are asking about the Spanish. Yes, I do want to add the Spanish. There will be a conquest version. I'll work on that eventually, but that's going to take a lot more research because, again, I want to make sure that like everything that I make for this is accurate and on par with that. I'm not going to half-ass it. I want to make sure it all looks and feels like a one cohesive thing that's all interconnected, and they're all at the same quality as far as writing, art, all that stuff, research, all that stuff is concerned. So no timeline on when those will come out, but I do want to do those, and those will get done at some point in the future.
Do you ever see yourself doing other sort of neighboring empires? Like I was reading not too long ago that they found some trade between the Incas down in South America and the Aztecs, or the Mayas, who are sort of right next door, or even the who would it be? The Navajo and the Apache that were more up north in what then would have been Mexico.
Yeah. I think that that would take a lot of research because that would be like a whole other book. But I suppose I could do extra. The rules are already set, I guess. It's just a matter of like the urgency of each one. Like for me, I feel like doing like the Tlaxcala and the Spaniards are very important because that's just a big part of Aztec history. The Tlaxcala were the ones that allied with the Spanish and definitely it really helped them defeat Tenochtitlan and the Triple City Alliance. So it's sort of a matter of like what would be more important, what's higher. For Incas and like Maya and stuff like that, they're different. They're slightly different cultures. There's lots of overlap. They share a lot of the same gods, but like the Maya spoke a different language, a slightly different language, had different gods, some different beliefs and stuff like that. So again, I'd want to make sure that I'm doing that correctly. But at the same time, if someone else wants to take up the mantle and gets to that before me, someone else gets to the Inca before me or the Maya before me, that's cool. Go for it. Like I encourage people to make stuff for my things as well, build off of what I do. I 100% support that. So I'll throw that out there as well. If you can't wait for me and you want to do it yourself, then go for it.
So, this, I think people who haven't written campaign guides don't quite understand just how much labor and effort and love has to go into one to make it, taking years and years. So where do you go from here? I mean, you mentioned having some things to support this, but do you have any plans for anything else, or you're just like, I got to take a little break for a while? Or
I have a hard time sitting still and resting. I'm not very good at that. I should rest probably after this, but I'm probably, as soon as I'm done fulfilling this, I'm probably going to jump right into whatever the next thing is. And I have some ideas. I have my Cowpunchers game, which is like a cowboy game. I kind of want to do some stuff with that still. I have Atomic Punk 2160. I want to do some stuff with that as well. I have an idea for like expanded creatures and equipment and guide and all that kind of stuff that would be like a little companion book to that one that would expand monsters and weapons and armor and all that kind of stuff. Maybe some setting information as well. I've sort of hinted at it in my zine, but I when I run it, I use this. I live here in Idaho, so it's like this post-apocalyptic Idaho setting that I would like to publish at some point for that. And I kind of want to take the Cowpunchers rules and apply it to other settings as well from my own system. My mind goes in a bajillion different places because again, I struggle with resting and just taking a deep breath and relaxing. I'm, again, really bad at it, so my mind instantly goes in a million different directions. So we'll see. I don't know what'll be next, but there's definitely going to be something.
And so for the art for Macuahuitl, did you do everything yourself?
It's like 90% me. There's a few pieces that are, so like that one there is me. There's a few pieces that were from public domain that I just thought were super cool, or ones that were redrawn or traced and altered versions from the codices, or that I kind of had to redraw because they're just poorly bad scans and stuff like that. Because I wanted to have that sort of the look in some parts of the Spanish codices where they had a lot of the Nahuatl people, the Aztec people, sort of do their own little illumination drawings on the parchments, and I wanted to incorporate a lot of that. But most of it is me. Before I started writing game books, I was doing art for books in the hobby since like 2015. So that part is not foreign to me at all.
For anyone who's trying to make their own campaigns, get them published, what sort of advice would you give someone?
I feel like I'm a unique case, but I would say just go for it. Really, I think playtesting is important. There's so many products that sometimes don't get out there and get playtested. I understand sometimes it's not easy to get playtested, but if you can playtest stuff, do that. Let as many people read your stuff as possible to help find errors and correct stuff. I think some people are a little more forgiving to smaller creators who can't afford an editor or something like that. Mm-hmm. But we all have friends and family that can read a few paragraphs at a time, or critical parts for us that can maybe get a second pair of eyes on that, and that's always useful. And I don't know. I just feel like lucky and blessed that I can do the art and everything myself. Like I'm a one-man show on this, and in a lot of ways, I did the layout, the art, the writing, self-editing, all that stuff is 100% me, and not many people can do that.
Yeah.
It
keeps the cost down.
It keeps the cost down. It's very stressful. It gives you gray hairs, and you have to end up working a lot slower because you're doing the jobs of like 4 or 5 people. But there's pros to it as well. But do as much of it as you can, and don't be afraid to learn things. I would say one way you could really save yourself costs and stuff is to do the layout yourself. Learn to do layout. I think that's a super valuable skill that you could get. And it's not like it'd be really hard to do art like this on screen. Learn how to draw and draw people and to do it well. That takes years of practice. But you can learn to do layout. It's possible for you to learn how to do layout. You can buy Affinity. I made this in Affinity. You can buy Affinity for $50, $60, $70. I don't know how much it is. It's on sale a lot of the time too, sometimes for 50% off. Get Affinity, learn it, learn to do layout, and you'll save at least on that front. Maybe you can if you can't do art like this, maybe you can put that money that would go towards layout, you can put that towards more art, all that kind of stuff. Add an editor if you really want that. Try and do as much as you can that you feel is possible on your own, and I think you'll be surprised at how good it can look.
Yeah, the other thing too about layout, that's a really good point. The tools itself are not super duper difficult to learn. And if people are worried about the creative part, you don't really have to be. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you're going 1E, just look at how they did it and sort of do very similar layout styles. If you like 5E, there's all sorts of you can get those parchment like backgrounds.
Mhm.
Just look at how they lay out the paragraphs and where they would stick a picture or whatever. It's definitely a good place to save money, I think.
Yeah, if you could buy Affinity again, it's a one. Well, the great thing about Affinity is it does almost everything that InDesign can do,
Mm-hmm.
but you don't have to pay the monthly fee to keep using it. It's a one-time
Yeah.
fee, and it's yours forever. And you could sit down and learn Affinity in an afternoon and be competent enough to make your first module, to make that first thing. I think where you can watch some tutorials. That's what I did. I had no idea how to use Affinity. And I was like, I need to sit down and learn how to do this myself. Because I was using Scribus before that, and Scribus is just painful to use. I love that it's free, it's open source, but man, it's just pain to use. So I sat down over a weekend on an afternoon and just watched some tutorials. And at that point, I was like, all right, I think I know enough to where I can do it. And then I made cowpunchers in that. That was the first one where I used Affinity after using Scribus. So and I'm not very good, like if I can do it and I'm not super duper tech savvy, I'm not like this software pro. If I can do it, then I think most anyone else can do it too.
Yeah. Um, so, we're just about an hour. I know you're busy. I know you got a lot of shows. You got a family, things to do. But any last parting words on Macuahuitl or anything in general?
Um, no, just thank you to everyone that backed this. Like it got funded in 6 days, and that just like I'm
That's
still
awesome.
I'm still have my mind blown by that. Because I wasn't sure people would like this. I've said on multiple shows, it's a niche within a niche within a niche. So I wasn't sure, and we did it in 6 days. So I'm just super thankful to everyone that believes in this project, believes in me, and has offered support. Um, we can be at each other's throats a lot in this hobby, but I really felt like people supported this and supported me in this, and I'm just super thankful for that. It's uh, I can't express it enough in words. I feel like to people. I just hope that when you get the book, you enjoy it.
Yeah, I had a feeling this would do pretty well. One, you have a lot of the OSR people. They like this kind of thing, and it's new subject material, so it's not quite the same. It's like, oh, another Greyhawk or another, this or that. It's something that's a lot more unique, but it's still got those old school vibes. And I think there's going to be an emerging market because a lot of 5e is it's about 10 years old right now.
Mhm.
There's only so long that WotC can keep reprinting the old adventures, and people are going to sort of be tired of that, and they're going to want
Mhm.
something new and different. And yeah, you got to learn a little bit different rule set, but it's not that different. So I think stuff like this, it's a little more gritty, takes you out of the typical D&D universe. I think those are going to do really well within the next 5 years.
I agree. I think a lot of the future stuff is like really unique settings and ideas that people haven't seen much of before. I'm not going to say I was the first to do this. We have uh, uh, what was the TSR one? I'm drawing a blank on it now. Metzlon, I forget what it's called. uh, and there was some dungeon adventure. So I'm not, and I've seen other stuff that has done this before, but there's not a lot of it. So yeah, I guess to go back to giving advice, find that really unique thing that you're really passionate about and just go for it. I'm sure someone else out there is like, that's cool, that needs to exist. So yeah,
Definitely. All right. Well, I don't want to hold you up. So thank you very much for coming. Thank everyone who showed up in the chat today. So for me, I will have another guest probably next week. Not quite lined up yet, but it will get there. Friday night, I will be on the Dungeon Delvers channel to play Classic Gamma World.
nice.
Uh, one more game before we switch over to Call of Cthulhu for the Halloween season. And yes, eventually my home campaign, Empire of the Undying Sun. The website will be up. There will be more announcements as exactly what's going on, probably late October to the beginning of November. So
Awesome.
thank you very much, John. And again, thanks everyone. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.
See ya.